Hello, welcome. Today I am joined by Craig Lee, who's physiotherapist and owner at the Physio Lounge. Craig, how are you doing?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm all good, thanks.
So I've got my mug today, which is it says
Oh,
hubby on, and I've just got married recently. We were just talking prior to this, and it was one of the questions that I wanted to touch on with you. So your wife is involved with the business, and we were chatting about giving not advice, but just like your experience of that.
yeah.
So how is it working with your wife?
We we are so different in that we bring different things to the table, I guess. So Lorraine isn't a physio. She comes from a corporate background, so she worked in big corporate companies, and for the first 5 years she wasn't involved in the business. And we realized that we needed that kind of support from an ops perspective. And yeah, she came on board 5 years in and brought a lot of that experience and knowledge and structure and processes and systems that she got from corporate background into the business. And at first, we did sort of have some rules, and they were a bit lax around, talking about work and things outside of work. And I think over the years, especially because we've got 3 kids now as well, we're a bit more strict on those rules. So we try to really stick to the no talking about work after 8 o'clock rule, which is hard with kids because it takes us till about 9 o'clock to get them all to bed now because they're all different ages. But if something does kind of come into your head, and as a business owner, it happens all the time, you can't fully ever switch off from the beast of the business, I guess, because it's always there. So things will just crop up, and you will let them enter your mind. So we have a no talking to each other about work after 8 o'clock. So we just have to enforce Slack messages or emails to each other, which is a bit random when you sat next to each other on the couch having a bit of a relax watching Netflix or something. But that it just happens, as you know yourself, having a business, ideas or a thought just pops into your head that you think, oh, I've not done this, or this needs to be looked at. Have we checked that? So we will just sort of send each other a Slack, and that way we can sort of confine it to our working days and hours so that it's not coming into your mind, because there were times where we'd be chatting about things till late at night because that's the only time we could really get together to discuss things, and we just couldn't sleep. You've got a lot of things going through your head, and it's affecting our sleep. So that rule is something that we both can be guilty of forgetting at times, but we do kind of shoot each other down in a loving way. But we do shoot each other down, sort of say, just send me in Slack, like I don't want to talk about it now. I'm just having a chill out and I need to switch off. And it's an innocent discussion at the time. It's not like we're doing it because I want to make you think about work, but it really can, and it can be quite hard to switch off from it. So that was a rule that I think was really important. We kind of stay in our own lanes as well. So, I'll defer things to Lorraine. That's her responsibility. She'll defer things to me, which is my responsibility. So I think having it as a job spec. So Lorraine knows she's operations director. I know I'm clinical director, and I fall within my roles and responsibilities, and she falls in hers. So we've really kind of defined the roles to make sure that there's that separation, and we each know what we're responsible for. And some of that we probably learned over the years, and some of that was more about kind of trying to set those boundaries as much as we could early on. And I think there's still things to learn. We have our moments. But a lot of people ask that question, when it's husband and wife team. And there's a lot of pros and cons to it. But I think having those boundaries and the sort of rules are really important.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? Like, I think defining those roles, as you said there, is great. I mean, also having a wife that's had a really, very professional career. Like,
Yeah.
she management consultant, you said before.
She worked in like worked in as utilities, and she worked at agency and capital, and it was all kind of workforce planning. So she worked on like scheduling and planning, and basically some of the stuff we do now, like contact center work, but on a smaller scale for our business. So she did that on a much bigger scale, and she's got a degree in business management and psychology. So the knowledge she gained from the degree subconsciously kind of led her to be the perfect person to be in the role that she's in now. And I think when she went to go and do the degree at uni before we were together, had she thought she was going to be running a physio business, I'd highly doubt. But the skills and the knowledge that she's learned from the role she had on a degree really lend themselves well into the industry that we're currently in.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And again, I think I remember you and I met at one of your clinics. It's probably about 18 months ago, and I
Yeah,
honestly loved the conversation. And I went back in. It really inspired me. Just talking about the way that you drive your culture, your processes. I was just really impressed with the way that you do it. Um, and just you seem very structured, and you seem like you've got a brilliant way of doing it. It's one of those where you think, God, that'd be a really good place to work. So where has that come from then, in terms of that setup of all the different systems that you've got? And we've taken a lot of the ideas that you
yeah,
said about values and
yeah.
the way that you praise those. Where's that come from?
Making mistakes. That was the big driver. I think, we as physios go into having a business because we like the idea of it. We think it's the next step. We want to have some control over what we can earn, I guess. And along the way, you are massively in the deep end, and you make mistakes. You really do, and it's about how you learn from them. Mistakes, or things happening, things going wrong at first. I really used to struggle with it. My head had just completely fall off as soon as something went wrong, and or somebody left, or something happened, or we had a complaint or something like that, and I was just in the complete wrong mindset. And I had to learn to sort of flip that and sort of look for the the benefits from that, something going wrong, and what I can learn from that, how I can make changes, rather than just be like, oh, everything goes wrong all the time. And I was definitely in that negative mindset for the first few years of having the business. One of the big turning points for me was I had a business coach at the time who recommended the E-Myth book, E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. That really, I remember kind of laughing out loud to some of the stories and the conversations, and I'm thinking, like, this guy is describing me. Having a bit of a brain fart of being an entrepreneur, but then as soon as you set the business up, you fall back into this technician role or mode, and you're just focusing on, I guess, comfort zone. I'm a physio, so if I just be a physio all day long, then I'm doing my job and I'm doing what I need to do, and I feel comfortable there. And actually, the entrepreneurial mindset maybe wasn't a comfortable zone for me. So I would almost kind of ignore certain things that I should be working on, like strategy and accounts and things like that. So that provided some insight into getting structure in place and having that structure, because you onboard somebody, and then I was the go-to person. So I'm working clinically 5-6 days a week, really busy diaries, and then someone would forget how to do a report for Bupa or how to send a letter to a GP, and then I'd be helping them do that, and then somebody else would be asking me something different, and we realized we needed to have all this information in one central place so that people could help themselves rather than relying on me to do it all. So some of that comes from the Michael Gerber book, and then we kind of integrated that into a system, a platform that we use online. Spent a lot of time just documenting everything, documenting processes, documenting systems, and now that becomes a knowledge base, so everybody can then tap into that and access that. And Lorraine was at the forefront of bringing that in. She found the system, she did a lot of the work with the admin team in the background, and now we encourage our team, if a new process comes into the business, or we're working with a new company or with a new product or whatever it is, we encourage everybody to be involved in documenting that process onto the system, so that we've got that there, so we can then make it easy for everybody else to access the same information, and that then allows us to be much more consistent in what we deliver. And that's something, again, I think we just learn from mistakes, to be honest.
Like, so you mentioned Trainual as the product that you use to do that. So if
Yeah.
you say that those teams are uploading stuff, like, how do you make sure that they're not just putting up stuff that you don't agree with, or
Yeah.
that's not a procedure that you want?
So there is a training, a process to guide everybody in how to document a process, which sounds a little bit over the top, but it just helps us to systemize that. So if you're putting something on there, this is the process that we follow to do that. And it might be that there's a collaborative work on a process that gets documented on there, but actually what we'll do is work with the management team who will then kind of oversee it, so it sort of remains in a draft mode before it's then published, so it can then be reviewed and checked and make sure that we're happy with the information that goes out. And everything changes as well, you know. There'll be processes that we put on there 5 years ago, and it might have sort of changed. So we do try to review it frequently. But what we find is that new team members coming on board, as they go through their onboarding process, we encourage them to flag things that maybe do need to be updated if they've seen it. We'll always try to do that beforehand, but if they flag something in their induction, I'll always say to them, you know, if you're noticing something that you've read is different, please let us know. We'll change it. So we're always very interactive with that, and I think it's important that the team feel a part of it as well, so that they really understand the context behind it, because you know, it can be a lot to work through all of these things when you first start, and we have a structure in terms of how that's sent out to the new onboarders so that they don't feel overwhelmed. But the key is it becomes that knowledge base, so that you can then just simply search for a keyword and it will find a process, it'll find a policy, it'll find some training information or resources that are useful for everybody, and you can put videos on there and documentation and things like that. So it works really well for us. There are lots of different ones out there on the market, some free versions for smaller teams below 5, but obviously we've kind of invested in this long term, so you know, a lot of that information for us now is just all embedded into the platform, and it makes it much smoother for onboarding. It makes it much easier, because if somebody has a question, the first response is, have you checked on the platform? And what happens is they're probably not asking anymore, they're just going straight there to find the answer, because it's important that you allow people to be able to be self-sufficient and find this information themselves, rather than feeling the need to constantly ask. Now, we're not sort of saying you can't and we're not available, but what we're saying is we put a lot of time and effort into putting this information out there for you in a very simple way, so you can find that yourself rather than waiting for somebody to be able to respond. So we're trying to just create that autonomy where people can find information.
Yeah, creating accountability and also just allowing you to focus on bigger picture things rather than sending a spreadsheet or whatever else it is. No, it sounds really good, and I love hearing it. So I'm going to share this with our general manager, because you met her previously, and always keen to make things better on that. So for you then, where are you from originally, and what made you get into physio?
So I'm from St Helens, and I was always kind of sporty. I loved doing different sports and things, but I was just never really exceptional at anything. I kind of like just doing bits and bobs of different things, but I was always interested in the human body. My best mate, who was the best man at each other's wedding, he had a bit of a back injury when we were kids, and I didn't really know anything about physio. I think we were in like second year high school, and he played a lot of rugby at the time, and he'd been for some physio, and he was talking about having this physio, and then I sort of seen him do his rehab, and he got better, and then he got back playing rugby again, and I thought, oh, I quite like the idea of that. You know, I'm interested in sport, I'm interested in the human body. Maybe that's something I'd like to do. And I was only in second year of high school, and I made the decision that I was going to be a physio at that point. So in some ways, it was a bit easy for me then through school, because I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and a lot of my friends and family members didn't know what they wanted to do, so they were kind of going through GCSEs and then they were choosing A levels, didn't really know what they wanted, but I kind of knew. So what do I need to do now? And I'm a bit like that. I kind of decide and then I work towards that goal, and once I get that in my head, that happens. So yeah, I just worked towards that and decided that's what I wanted to do, and just loved it. You know, loved the profession. I loved my time at uni. Like, actually I really enjoyed all of the placements and even my rotations on like elderly care and respiratory and neuro. I took a lot from that, and actually a lot of that stuff I'm still using today in my MSK practice with a lot of the complex rehab patients that we see. And I just love helping people. I've always been that kind of empathetic person. I've got quite a large family, so I've got 2 brothers and a sister. And I was always kind of the caring, empathetic one. If 2 were ganging up on the other one, I'd always take the side of the one that was getting ganged up on. And then what would happen is the one that I was helping would then usually go back to the other 2, and then they would sort of gang up on me a little bit because I was maybe showing a little bit of in that kind of sibling rivalry, a bit of what maybe we're seen as weakness, because of that caring nature, that empathetic nature. But I really see that as a strength now, because I bring that to everything that I do, and that empathy towards patients and really understanding the needs. So I think that's always been embedded in me from when I was a kid. And some people do then think, oh, I want to be a physio, and then they'd go and start the degree and then change their mind and realize that maybe that's not actually what they wanted because they didn't know what it was about. Some people go into physio thinking I want to be in sport, and then go through all of the training and think, oh, actually I didn't realize I had to, work on wards and work on respiratory and things. So they drop out part way through. They don't see the benefit of that experience and how that can transfer into what we do. So yeah, that was kind of my journey. I knew I did know I wanted to work in sport. Being from a town that has a massive rugby team. So I remember actually being at Nosey Road at Saints when I was a kid, because I was a season ticket holder. I used to go to the games, at the home and away games all the time, and just seeing the physio on the pitch with the orange top on and thinking, I'm going to be on that pitch one day, looking back at the crowd. And I managed to do some time at Saints as a first team physio before the Nosey Road Stadium was demolished and we moved. So I actually was on the pitch and I looked at the corner that I was stood at about 5 years prior and thought, I remember standing over there looking over, and here I am now on the pitch looking back. So it was a bit of pride there. And my family, mainly my grandparents, my nan and granddad, who massive Saints fans, so there was a bit of pride there to be able to work for that club and have that experience within the town. But before that, I actually worked for Preston North End in my final year at uni. I managed to get a placement there, which was really, really informative. Steve Kemp was the head physio at the time, who's now the England head physio. So I was just like a sponge, like absorbing as much information as I could and learning as much as I could at the time. So that was really beneficial. And then I was offered a job off the back of my time at Preston at Millwall. So working at Millwall. So literally graduated and went straight down there to Millwall. Spent some time there, but I knew I really wanted to get that experience of working in the NHS. I felt I had a bit of responsibility at the time to the NHS in a way, because our courses were fully funded. So I felt like I wanted to go and work in the NHS, do my rotations, and just keep learning all the different areas, so that I wanted to be an MSK physio, but I still wanted to have that foundation underneath me as well. So I moved back up north and got a job at Warrington Hospital, and then worked through my rotations. And then after that, that's when I moved on to Saints. So I did a year part-time with the academy, and then I went on to the first team full-time. So moved into that. So that was kind of the journey. I loved working in sport, but the problem is in sport, and as I'm sure people that you work with and see in sport, is it's a massive, massive commitment. And for me, it was difficult for my mum and dad to have time to sort of, with 4 kids, to get to like football and rugby every weekend, and they couldn't always be there. So I wanted to be able to be there for my kids. So we didn't have kids at the time, and I made that decision to sort of move away from sport so that I could have that time on a weekend with my family. And I get to go to Oscar's football, and Benji will be starting soon. I get to go and do these things and see them, and not have to be checking my phone for fixtures and can I go to this wedding? Can I go to that christening? Oh, I can actually go to that wedding this time because the game's on a Friday. Oh no, Sky want the game. They're going to put it on Saturday instead. So the fixtures changed. And that would happen quite frequently through the season. So that's why I made the decision to work in private and then obviously set up my own practice. And that's kind of in a nutshell, my physio journey to date. And amidst all of that, I did my master's as well whilst I was working at Saints, did my master's in sports physiotherapy at the University of Bath. So again, really useful for when I was actually working in sport, but a lot of that then is transferable massively into the private sector. You know, we still work with some semi-pro athletes and you know, athletes to a good caliber who recreational sports. So, you know, we do a lot of work there that my experience, I guess, to date lends itself to that. I think that was a big driver as well. That was kind of the main reason I wanted the business, because I'd worked in the NHS, I'd worked in private, and there was such a gap in getting people back to that high level of performance. It is often in the NHS, so you can walk pain-free, will discharge. Whereas for us, that's when the work starts. You know, once we've got people out of pain, now we really want to be looking at movement patterns and looking at strength deficits, imbalances, progressing them through a return to sport pathway, making sure that they can get to top end sprint, change direction, take contact if they need to. So looking at that sport specific return to play work and then enhancing them. So I always like my patients and the players I work with to come back even better than they were before the injury. You know, injuries are often seen as a very negative thing, but I look at them as there's a gift in this injury happening, because we can now spend some time to focus on areas that we've not been able to focus on because the season's so busy, or if they're playing sport in recreational sport, they're just trying to work and they're trying to go to training and do the game on the weekend, and nobody really sort of steps back and thinks about, actually, I've got some time now because I'm not playing and I'm not training as much to focus on some of these areas that I might have had some imbalances and some weaknesses and some stiffnesses in before. So try to flip the negative into a positive as much as possible so that people actually come back even better, even stronger, rather than just sort of scraping through rehab and getting back and then re-injuring, which is unfortunately what we see quite often. So that was kind of the big driver around setting up our own clinic, so that we can bring that level of care and intervention to the general population who don't always get access to that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and it was one of the questions I was going to ask anyway, but you kind of touched on it there. Was I've seen massive change in we used to do predominantly work in the NHS, and now predominantly we're in private practice in elite sport, because I think it's shifting that way. But like you mentioned there about there being a gift in an injury and understanding it, how have you seen clients, patients, I mean, even what you call them, change over the years? And looking at this as, rather than just you go and see you when you're injured, people coming in, or once they've been in with you, they're actually looking at it. It's kind of merging with like the gym. Like when I was growing up, there was like one gym in Southport where I'm from, and now there's so much of it. Like how have you seen it change in the last, well, since you've set the company up?
Oh, huge change. I mean, the problem is standard physio. I think the rehab that people would give would be necessary at the time of when they're injured, when they've got load compromise, and you have to give them more kind of body weight, basic exercises. But that's the problem. It kind of stopped there in the past, and people weren't being loaded sufficiently for what was required of them, whether that was in the day-to-day life, the job, or sport. And in order for us to load people enough, we need to use equipment, gym, add load to body weight to challenge that. And that's where loads of people were going wrong, essentially. They weren't reloading enough, strengthening enough in order to encourage them to return back to the specific goal that they wanted. And the old kind of conversation of load versus capacity, if we're not providing rehab that's going to load that patient enough, then actually the capacity is still going to remain lower than what is expected of the load in terms of whatever they're doing. And I say that could be anything like picking up a baby or going up the stairs or doing your job. So we have to make the rehab very sort of targeted and specific to the needs of that person. And I mean, I've always took people in the gym, I guess, because I've come from that early sports background, and we would always take them through the rehab in the gym and load people up. So that's kind of natural to me to do. But some people, as we're bringing people through, people find that they're not as comfortable in that environment, like physios in particular, not as comfortable taking patients through that in the gym. So it is something that we really encourage. All of our sites either have a gym within them, or they're on a site where there is a gym that we can access with our patients, and we'll often take patients into that rehab space. And a lot of the time, they've never been in a gym before. So you might get your chronic back pain patient who, very sedentary job. And yes, we might provide some manual therapy and some interventions to help manage the pain early on. But we will make sure we encourage that person through a rehab journey. And for me, there's a responsibility there. There's education and lifestyle changes that are needed. It's just a bit unfortunate. I was talking to a patient about this actually a couple of days ago. The way the NHS is set up, it's very reactive healthcare. So it's very much when you're broken, we'll look at doing something about it at that point. There's a little bit of preventative healthcare with maybe, weight management and other little bits, getting checks done like prostate checks and encouraging people to go and do that. So they are starting to make a bit of a shift there. But you look at the private healthcare model, there's so much more preventative healthcare now out there, particularly things like bloods. So you're seeing this popping up all the time. People, check if you've got allergies, check if you've got intolerances, have a look at your testosterone levels. So that is something that isn't necessarily routinely available on the NHS, and people are going out there to have a look at this information and take some ownership of their own health. And as a private physio practice owner, that is the route that we are encouraging, because we've always done this work in sport, preventative. We've always looked at screening players in the off season. Where are the strength deficits? Where are the stiffnesses, range of motion issues? What can we look at to try and reduce injury risk? And we know that if we reduce injury risk and we improve efficiency in how someone moves, we naturally will enhance their performance as well. So the two go hand in hand. But the mindset of patients coming through our doors is, I've got pain, I'm broken, can you fix me? And I said to a patient the other day, he had a previous shoulder injury, and then he come to me with an elbow problem on the other side. And I'd said to him, how did you know you were fully recovered from your shoulder? What's the criteria in your mind for you to have fully recovered? And it was pain. I can do the things around the house and the things I want to do without pain. But when we did some dynamometer testing on him, his right shoulder was 30% weaker than his left, and he's right-handed. So as he's got back into pushing himself in the gym a little bit, he's then started to pick up some tendinopathies and some reactive stuff from that. So again, it's changing. We have a responsibility to educate people on preventative and looking at these kind of imbalances, rather than this mindset of there's pain. Because when there's pain, it's much more difficult to accurately screen somebody, because pain will negatively affect those results. So obviously, once I get someone out of pain, that's when the real work starts. That's when we need to be looking at muscle imbalances, how someone's moving, and doing some comparative data checks, using whether it might be force plates or dynamometry or whatever you've got, and trying to put some objective numbers on that information. That way you can then guide that person more and educate to say, look, actually, I know you're not in pain, which is great. However, there's maybe still a bit of work to do here in terms of strength and stability, and getting you moving equally between the two sides. So yeah, there's definitely a shift there. but unfortunately there's still a very reactive mindset, and I don't know whether that's driven by the way the NHS is sort of run. It's like, don't contact us unless you're broken, in a way. Whereas we're saying, if you want to know some of this information, do it when you've not got pain. Let's have a look. Let's screen you. Let's have a look at how you move. Let's do some strength testing. And that way we can give you a very specific program to help with managing your injury risk and also improving your performance.
Yeah, no, it's interesting hearing all of that bit, and it's great to see that that's what you're doing, and the fact that NHS isn't doing it and is unlikely to in the short term, I guess, helps your business because you're able to work with that. And I think it'd be interesting to see how you could explore ways where it could be more synergistic and was a bit more integrated. But like for your team, then, so we'll go back to how you started in a second, but just like when you've got your team in and like you want them to follow this philosophy of all of this, how do you get them? Because all that stuff that you mentioned, technology, force plates, dynamometers, whatever it is, shockwave, any of these things, it costs money. You've already said you invest a lot into systems, which I know that can cost a lot of money that you're signing into these things. So how do you get your team on board with using this stuff and the philosophy of doing it? Because there's an element of it needs to be used. You need to be making money to make sure that you can afford to pay for this stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and a lot of it, I think, initially comes down to just evidence base. We can talk about evidence-based practice with them, and I think physios tend to look a lot at that. So when you're looking at some of the evidence around like the use of shockwave, it's really easy to get behind and encourage the physios to implement that in their clinical practice. The challenge often is around the sales element of that, so the cost to the patient, because I think physios tend to put themselves in this sort of position where they feel that need to be a financial advisor for patients, and you just don't know everybody's circumstances. So what I do is just work on educating our team around just providing gold standard service. If this was as part of our core values, we say, treat your customer or patient as a family member. What would you offer to that family member? If you had access to shockwave and foot scanning and dynamometry and force plates and all these different things, what would you offer that family member as part of their rehab journey? Whether money was an object or not, putting that in front of them because it's gold standard. And then it's then linking that back to the value of that. So if you can get someone's pain under control more quickly using shockwave, and then offloading tissues that were overloaded using insoles or something like that, you can actually then it becomes about the clinical benefit of it rather than the financial side of it. So you're almost removing the financial element in a way, because you're offering something, and it shows the value of the service or the product or whatever you're trying to sort of promote. So you're coming from a place of like clinically justifying this to patients and helping them understand the value and linking that back to whatever their goal may be, to keep them moving, keep them working. And I've been guilty of this so many times, making assumptions about what someone can afford. There might be someone, I had an Achilles patient in, and he was, a working class guy comes in, and straight away you sort of make assumptions wrongly about what someone might be able to afford. And the guy was, look, I need to get back to work. I've got my own business, and it's very physical work. And if I can't do that job, I'm not earning any money. And I offered him, I think at the time it was like a 2-week follow-up, and he was a partial Achilles tear. And he was like, can I not come in like later this week? I'm like, yeah, like why didn't I offer that? If I was working in sport, I'd be seeing that player every single day. We're given something to do, workarounds, gym, cardio, soft tissue, whatever it may be. So why am I not offering that to this guy who clearly wants to put himself in a position where he can get better, because he needs to be able to return to work to earn money. So he really valued it. Other people sometimes tend not to value it, and I think that comes from, it's seen as a free service in the NHS. Even though we all pay national insurance, we still see it as like, oh, it's free. But people will then tend to look at value in things like cosmetic work. And, I always say to my wife, you don't even question how much it is for your hair, you just go and get it done. But often in private healthcare, costs and things do get questioned a little bit. So yeah, it's bringing it back to the value. So we have those conversations, and I do a lot of this work. So we do quarterly team alignment days. We do a full day once a year, and then we do half days every quarter. And this is the sort of stuff we talk about. So we'll have conversations about it. We'll do some maybe a presentation around it. We'll do some little breakouts and group discussions, and just really get their ideas and inputs and thoughts around this stuff, because it's probably a little bit of a taboo thing, isn't it, in healthcare, the sales chat. But yeah, I really encourage educating the guys, and again, from business coaching support for me, just the context. Like, if you don't provide the context, a lot of the time people fill in the blanks. And I think as private clinic owners, a lot of the time people tend not to talk about the numbers and how a business works. I don't know why, for whatever reason, there's always this kind of awkwardness around that. So we did an exercise. I think to me, it was educated in a way where you'd have a piece of cake and you'd cut the cake into different slices, and each slice will be a percentage of where the revenue goes from each sale that the customers paid for. So I looked at it in a different way, and so I said, right, here's £1 in 1p pieces. So we put them all into little groups. We gave them all £1 in 1p pieces, and I just asked everybody in the groups to on scraps of paper just put down where does each one of these 1p, where do they go on what we spend to run the business. And it was really interesting. So everybody put all the 1p's down on different things, and then we just had a whiteboard, and we're like, right, shout out what you think. We're writing it all down, and it's like, this for subscriptions, this much for rent, this much for this, and some of it was close, some of it was miles away. Not one of them put net profit at all. And we then sort of said, look, none of you put net profit, so are we a charity? Do we just break even? And then what happens if something breaks? Well, for the physio plinth, there's a £1,200. What if that breaks? How do we replace that if we've not got any net profit? How do we pay tax? How do we reinvest in the growth of the business? So net profit is absolutely essential for a business to be able to reinvest and grow. So it was really interesting, because people think then that net profit is just mine and Lorraine's holiday fund, but what they don't see is that net profit, out of that net profit comes our corporation tax. And also, what if we have another COVID? We need net profit to be able to create reserves so that we can make sure we can survive different markets and challenging months. August is always quiet for physios. December is always quiet for physios. So we have to be able to navigate that. So I spend the time educating and providing the contacts, and that, and that's come a lot from like business coaching advice for myself, and I had to learn that a little bit over the years. But actually putting that out there to the team so they can really understand that, that went down really well. And actually a lot of the team were just very appreciative of us spending the time and educating them on how a business works, how it runs.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? But you're right. There's a lot of taboo around. Oh, we don't want people to know what our turnover is. We don't, as in internal people. And it's just like, it doesn't really. It's not showing much trust in the team, is it? Really, like in terms of that bit, whereas you actually really talk them through and say, look, this is the reality of what it is. And yes, actually, you and Lorraine do need a holiday, and you do need to save money, and you do need to make money, because it's stressful and there's a massive investment, and that's fine. And I think it's even with the same with patients, is giving them the choice with everything, isn't it? Look, this is the reality. This is where we're at. And this, everyone has got a choice with whatever they do, whether to work for you, to get treated by you, whatever it is. And yeah, I agree with you. I think that transparency a bit, and I'm almost convincing myself on it as well, because I will still do it. Like, oh, actually, I'm not sure. Should that be shared? But it actually is really counterproductive.
Yeah. And if you don't share some information, people will often make the assumption anyway. And the assumption is always going to be worse than the actual reality, you know. So when you give the context and the reality, it's like, actually, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. So you want to try and just remove some of those assumptions. And then the other thing that we do with the physios, again, people sort of talking themselves out of offering shockwave or insoles and things like that. It was actually a recommendation recently that someone suggested, it was a podiatrist suggested this, that if you believe that, say, an insole or shockwave is really important for that person's recovery, it's part of their treatment pathway, part of their treatment plan, rather than offering sort of alternatives to say, well, if you can't afford it, oh, don't worry, we can give you this workaround and it might not be as good, but we can do this instead. Really stick to your guns. So if it's, say it's insoles and someone can't afford to go down that route, then you're behind that intervention. So if they're not can't afford to pay for it privately, rather than changing that, refer them back to the GP so that they can get referred in to get that, because otherwise you're downplaying your recommendation really. And then it's up to the patient then, they're going to be referred into the NHS. What do they then value? Because the reality is, if they're not a high risk patient or a pediatric patient, the wait lists are quite large. I've heard patients say they've been waiting 18 months for podiatry, 12 months for podiatry. So if they're looking to get that kind of custom insole, then they're going to end up having to wait and to access that. So then they make a decision. Do I want to get this now and like make some changes now, or am I happy to wait? But don't change your recommendation. If somebody does say they can't afford it, they may then come back to us and say, do you know what, I don't want to wait that long. I value that and I'm going to invest in that. So we're not doing pushy sales with them, but I think it's just, if you take it off the table as an option, say, oh, don't worry, we can do this instead. You are potentially downplaying your advice. And again, if that was a family member, I would want them to have that insole, whether they paid for it from me or waited on the NHS, because that is the recommendation at the time for us to offload those structures. So it's just having those conversations, and we do a lot of that training, and we talk about that as a team. And even a bit of role play sometimes is quite useful to sort of see how people close their consult. How do you close it? How do they talk about, not just about foot scans and shockwave and expensive things, but how do you close your consult in terms of the plan? Does the patient know what the next session's going to involve? One of the metrics we track is cancel, no rebook. So we're looking at, they might have booked in at the time, but then they cancel, they've changed their mind, and then they've not rebooked. Why? What's happened there for that person to change their mind? Did they lose faith? Did they not trust the process? Did they not feel like they fully knew what the plan was in the next session? Did they not see the value in that? So we really tap into that and look at that as a metric.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, I think, as well as, and even like, I'm just reflecting there where you're saying, so I've been seeing a podiatrist recently, and they had to cancel one, then I had to cancel one, and then they've tried and done it, but I'm just doing other things. And sometimes it's just like, I want the clinician to phone me and say, look, Andy, brilliant, great, right, you get it in. But when life gets in the way of things,
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's the responsibility of the people to say, look, no, we really believe in this. When are we doing it? Not do you want to do it? Like, when are we doing it? And that's what I want as a person who wants my feet in good order. So
bringing back to values, like our values talk a lot about that. The customer's goal, the patient's goal is our goal. And I had a football player in the other day, and he did have to, in a nice way, but a bit of a firm, you've not done your rehab. I saw you on Thursday, I'm seeing you again on Monday. You wanted to do a couple of weeks, but you've not done the work. So we aren't going to get the change. If you want to get back to return to play in 6 weeks, we need you to be doing the gym work yourself as well. I've done some with you, but you've got to go and do it yourself. So he had a bit of a telling off from me the other day, and he's like, I'm going to gym tonight. I know I need to do it, because he knows that he won't get there. So we do have to, like, I'm passionate about him getting back. It's his goal is my goal. So once you get that, it's like if someone drops off, we have a list of cancel no rebook patients, and we'll phone people up. Like you say, life gets in the way a little bit sometimes. So we are, as much as anything, we're accountability pieces for patients. We keep people on track, and make sure that they're working through the rehab, and then they can get back to what they need to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a really good mindset. Like you've mentioned goal setting, and you always, when I see you, seem very together, and you know where you're going. So when you set the business up, then did you have a clear vision? Like, what was the vision for you and the goal?
Nothing at all. Literally, I like the idea of it, and I did not know I was walking into stormy waters, shall I say. There was no plan. The plan was open a physio business. That was it. And it's only over the years that we realised that you will just coast, and things will always go wrong, and there will always be problems unless. So I might look calm and collected at the moment, but it's that kind of swan analogy, isn't it? Looking fine, but then the little legs kicking under the water, and that's very much what we can be like at times. But yeah, there was no plan at all. It was a bit of a brain fart idea at the time. Just let's open a physio business and see where that takes us. Had no clue how to run a business. Had no idea. And actually, on reflection, I remember working in private practice and thinking, I'm doing all the work here, and I'm only getting paid like a certain amount, and that was the driver. But now, having been on the other side of it, knowing how much we do in the background to make sure patients are into people's diaries, insurance, marketing, website, all of the work that the admin team do. There's so much that gets done in the background, and I was so tunnel vision on what I was just doing as a clinician, and that's where I went wrong at the beginning. And we survived. We survived some kind of challenging times early on, and for me, though, it's about reflecting and learning and adapting to mistakes that we've made over the years. So now we have sort of set some goals and some vision in terms of where we want to go. And actually, if we didn't know where we were going, which we didn't, then our team didn't know where they were going either. So our last team alignment session, we mapped out the next 3 to 5 year vision, and we also got everybody in the team to do like a goal mapping exercise. So to think about where they want to be within their role in the next year, and why do they want to be there, and how are we going to do that, and who's going to be involved in getting them there. And that was a really nice little goal mapping session. So they've got their kind of 12-month plan, and then we know where they want to be so that we can support them better. So everyone's kind of aligned with where the business is going. And that, again, we never did any of that stuff. But what we do now is we ask the team. So we do our employee satisfaction surveys. And when we do our team alignments, we ask the team. This is, again, Lorraine doing all this. I can't take credit for this. But she asks them because, again, it's easy to bury your head in the sand and not want to hear anything that's maybe critical or negative about your business. But that's the goal for me. That's where we learn. That's where we develop. That's where we progress. So if we don't hear that, how can we then make improvements and changes for our team? And it's the same for patients. If you're getting great reviews all the time, it's nice to hear. But that feedback that's maybe like a 6 out of 10, let's dive into that. Like what could we have done to make that a 10 out of 10? What can we learn from that? Let's ask the patient about their experience, and just get comfortable with accepting that constructive feedback and making the necessary changes. I think it's massively important. And for a long time, I didn't like it. I don't like that. I'll just ignore that. Whereas now I welcome it with open arms, so that we can make improvements and changes, and each time, we grow, we've done that through previous mistakes. Because we're very risk averse. I can be quite risk averse, but in England, in the UK, if you look at America, it's very much fail fast type approach, isn't it? Whereas we're a bit afraid of failure, and we can tend to sort of, shield ourselves from that a little bit at times.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a really good approach, and it's not always easy. And it is like you
No.
kind of like just go into panic mode, fear mode, whatever it is. But I think that's really good. Like, how helpful, you've mentioned it a couple of times, how helpful is being a part of coaching or mentors or that sort of thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's massive. Even if it's just accountability to give you the time to focus working on your business. The first coaching guys we worked with was Physio Business Growth, a guy from Australia, John Davey, and he was great. And at the time it's difficult because we were going through COVID, and it's like trying to continue to afford to pay for things. But I would say a lot of that really embedded the mindset shift in me. And then we've moved on to the Hive now, who work with like physios, podiatrists, and osteopaths, chiropractors. And again, just the structure, some of the frameworks that we use in our team alignments have come from those guys. And just helping to develop us as leaders, as coaches, to get the best out of our team. So I think it's a very much valuable investment for business owners. It really focuses you. It really provides that sort of structure, gives you some advice on things. But the best thing about it is networking with like-minded business people who are in the crap at times together, and they go, I get you. I get where you're coming from. I've been there, and everyone's at different stages. So it's really nice to be able to help people, like for me to be able to help people out who are earlier on in their journey. But then likewise, there are people that are further on in their journey than I am. And, being around everybody doing different things, you just absorbing that and you're learning from that and you're picking up things. So everyone's very open to discussing what's working for them and what's not working for them and what they've tried. And, that is the real gold for me, just working with other business owners.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I joined a group about 3 years ago, and it's like it is a bit like this is a big investment, which it
Yeah,
is. It's an investment in time. I feel guilty sometimes as well in terms of going out of the business and that
yeah,
you're spending money on being out of it. That you've got that perception of well, what you're doing there. Whereas I think just even having that time out of the business is so important for me. You're speaking to other people, it makes you realize actually, shit, I'm not as crap as I think I am about that particular thing, or
yeah,
you can really relate about it. And it does give you that perspective on things, and also challenges you. Like I think having a really good challenging group that holds you accountable, all of
mhm,
these same things is it's yeah, I agree. I think it's really good, and whatever that is, whether it's the person that's leading the session, but like you say, more importantly, that your peers, it
yeah.
really does help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be seen as like that big investment, like you say, but the value you get from it, I think, will massively outweigh. It's hard to put it into monetary terms, I suppose, um, in terms of the return on investment. But yeah, it's given us a lot more structure. It's made us really focus on important things. At times, you're putting your one-to-one meetings in with you guys, and someone this creeps up, and you've got to move the meeting. Like we're so strict on that now. That doesn't ever happen. If a one-to-one's booked in, it's very rare that that'll be moved, and it might be more convenient for it to be moved to a different day because something's happened. But we'll always try to keep it in place, and that's protected time for that person. Like that's your time. We're going to work on you in this half an hour session. We're working on you. We're setting you some specific goals for the next month so that they really sort of benefit from that. And that's come from coaching and highlighting the importance of those interactions and those connections that we have with our team. um, it's so key to support and help to kind of retain your team, make them feel like valued in the role.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And then last question, like what would your advice be for clinicians starting out or people considering opening their own business?
Don't do it. No, I'm only joking. It's It probably is have a plan. You know, we didn't do that, and although you will still learn from things as you go, as I have done, have a clear plan, you know, vision of where you want to sort of be, where the business wants to go. If you end up starting out with one room, seems like a good idea at the time, you'll find that you can sometimes outgrow that, and then you have the challenges of moving premises and leases and things like that. So sometimes, you know, if you've got the funding there, try to go for something slightly bigger at the beginning. Even though it feels quite scary and quite risky to do that, it's a good idea to sort of have that in place early on, so that you're not having to move too fast. Give yourself time to focus on the business. You know, don't become an employee, and don't make the business a job. That's the biggest mistake I probably made early on. Is I just had a job. It wasn't a business, you know. And I was like, why is there no money in the bank in the first year? I'm thinking, I've done the work, I've done the invoicing, never even thought to look at the bank because I've done the work. And you have to be on it with chasing debt. You have to be like, people just don't pay straight away. You have to chase, you have to contact insurers or patients even sometimes. So the systems really help with that. That nearly killed us in the first year, to be honest, because the age debt got so out of hand because no one was doing it, because I was focusing on being a physio. Don't know how to do that. Don't know what to do there. Don't like phoning people up asking for money. So, you know, that was a big learning curve for us. And again, it probably didn't really get massively better until Lorraine started and put loads more things in place for us to sort of prevent that from happening, and also chase it at the right time. So yeah, definitely have a good plan, really think about all these things, think about the business side of it, not just what you will be doing as a clinician, because you will get trapped in that cycle of being the clinician, and you sometimes, it's very difficult to get out of that. So some of the people that come through into the coaching stuff I'm in at the minute are still 5-6 days a week clinical, and they can't possibly see how they can carve out time to work on the business, because if I'm not doing the work, where's the money going to come from? So they sort of get trapped, and there's a ceiling to that. They can only earn so much. Once you bring more of your team members in place, that's when it gets a bit easier. So it gives you time to work on the business, but it also gives you time to mentor and coach and develop your team and support their growth as clinicians as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great message, and I think that I genuinely think what you and Lorraine have built there is really impressive, really values led, culture led. So brilliant work on doing that, and well done with everything. And thank you for sharing. I always learn from this. I've made loads of notes, so thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Brilliant. Cheers, Craig. Have a good one.
You too.